For the first time in a long time, the weather in the village was good, the warm sun was shining and people were working in the fields. An old man walked through the entire village and carried on his back a bag of vegetables that he had collected from the garden. A woman and her daughter walked through the entire village and carried warm bread on their heads to feed the people who worked in the fields. From the very morning, people were already sowing the fields and plowing the soil, they were trying to have time to prepare the field for the new season. But from that time on, one man sat on the sidelines near the house and watched other people work. He realized that this profession was not for him. He was very thoughtful and recalled the mistakes of his youth, because of which he now had a lot of regrets. He blamed himself for the fact that when he was young he had to lie about having mastered the martial arts of Murim. Once upon a time, he came to the village of Wachon and told people that he was a 17-year-old student of Myeon Moon, and people believed his lies and realized that this man could stop the robberies and protect them. He only strongly believed in his lies that he was playing too hard and in fact began to consider himself a martial arts master. But his lies were not as dangerous as people might think because he actually devoted 40 years of his life to studying martial arts. Every day he tried new techniques and honed the martial arts techniques he already knew. He ideally had several combinations that allowed him to fight against strong opponents. One of the techniques was called step forward and 10 back. But the man often thought that the people around him were deceiving him much more than he was deceiving them. A man sits in a house and drinks alcohol. Next to him sits an old man who tells him that it is better to leave the village and follow the warrior because the warrior knows a lot of people and following him would be a good idea instead of sitting here. But the man reacts with rejection to the words of this old man. He drinks. The alcoholic says that he does not have enough virtues to follow a warrior. The old man tells the man that he has several children without parents whom he must give to someone and asks the man to accept these children. The man refuses this offer and says that in a few years they will be able to provide for themselves on their own. The old man understands that he will soon die and the children may not survive if they are not given to the care of someone. The old man says that it is best if these children follow the warriors and therefore will not be able to learn something and earn their own food. The old man took out a bag of money and handed this bag to the man. He said that this is all the money he has that he is ready to give so that the warrior can take his children. The warrior looked at this old man in surprise and thought that he had no conscience at all if he was offering money to give away his children. He saw that the bag contained silver and iron coins, maybe a good reward for taking responsibility for these children. But when they went outside, he saw that there were as many as 6 children standing near the stone fence. The man understands that he calculated that the money he took from the old man will not cover all the expenses for these children. He was upset for a moment and realized that he had been deceived because there were too many children and this money would not even be enough to feed them for 6 months. He understood that there was no turning back on the path and he needed to go to the end. Therefore, he told the children to follow him and went forward. The boy asked the other guys, "Is this man going to be their new grandfather?" The children began to follow the new grandfather and resembled small children who did not know what would happen next, they just followed the big mother duck. The old man who sold this war to the children watched them through the doorway. The daughter of this old man asked her father for a few people. He gave them to this hermit for the fact that he would simply take care of them on this day. The old man replied that in such situations you need to act according to the call of your heart and morals, therefore you cannot save on hermits, and he gave him as much money as he considered necessary. The woman said that this money was very important for their family, but the old man interrupted her and replied that there were a lot of these children and they would need money so that they could eat. He no longer wanted to argue with his daughter and simply turned around and left, saying that this was all empty talk. But all that worried her at that time was that they would have to eat only one risk for a very long time. The hermit walked through the forest with his new children in the direction of their new home. They had been walking through the forest for several hours and I didn't understand where this hermit was leading them, they just blindly followed him in the hope that he would lead them to a new home. The man walked silently all the way and thought that a very big responsibility for these children now lies on his shoulders and he must make the right decision so that everything is okay with them. The children followed the old man, the oldest ones went first, the rest caught up with them. The younger children constantly communicated with each other and discussed everything they saw around them. He turned his head and looked at them to make sure whether they had time to follow him or were lagging behind. When he turned his head back forward, he saw a small obstacle ahead that could interfere with them. Ahead of them the road ended and they had to jump down from the cliff in order to go further. He approached the cliff and looked down in order to understand how much distance they needed to overcome to get out of here, but the cliff was small so it was possible to cross. The man was the first to go down and then began to help the other children go down. He took them in his arms and lowered them down. The older children helped the younger ones climb down the cliff. They stopped near the river so that the children could play a little in the river and have fun. The old man at that moment just wanted to sit and relax. They washed themselves in the river and played with the water. They really liked this place. The eldest child helped the steel children wash themselves and get themselves in order so that they were clean. The man looked at this guy and realized that he was the oldest of them, so you can rely on him and expect support from him. They reached a small polar forest in the center of which they lit a fire in order to spend the night here and wait for the morning. A little girl approached her grandfather and asked how long they still needed to go to their new home and then yawned. He also yawned when he saw her and said that in one night they would arrive at the place and could rest. The children were very tired after this hike and immediately all fell asleep next to their grandfather. The old man also closed his eyes and fell asleep. Another day and one night passed and they finally reached a new house, which was located deep in the forest near large mountains. Only one old man lived in this house and there were no beds, so the children had to sleep on the floor. He looked at how these children slept and thought that he brought them here with him in order to save them. But their food supplies are very small and therefore they will have to eat only bread for some time. When he took this money, he thought that he could buy himself good tasty wine, but now he understands that this money will be spent on food for the children. The man decided to pamper these children a little and bought several chickens which he cooked in sauce and served to them. The children were surprised when they saw 3 chickens on their table. They could not believe that they would eat such delicious food. They looked at their grandfather with a surprised look and realized that this grandfather loves them very much since he brought them so much delicious food. He smiled and said in a loud voice that they should eat this chicken instead of looking at Grandpa. These children had never seen so much meat in their lives and all they had to eat in their short lives were just small pieces of meat that were given to them. The old man told them not to waste their time and eat the chicken while it was still hot. He was glad that these children liked the food he prepared. The children greedily ate the chicken that their grandfather gave them, each ate it in their own style and rejoiced at this food. The old man watched these children from the side and was glad that at least today they could be happy because soon they would not have so much food. After a couple of weeks, their food became much less, so the old man had to eyeball how much rice they would eat today. First of all, I used rice, which was going to spoil soon, and therefore I decided that I needed to cook it. But this rice was only enough for a few days and because of this the old man was upset because these were his main food supplies. He took out another bag of rice, which he considered a reserve, and poured it into the cauldron in which he was going to cook this rice. He thought that in this way he would clear his karma and in his next life it would be counted as a good deed. This time he prepared eggs for the children, which he managed to buy at a cheap price at the market. The children barely ate these eggs and they thought it was very tasty. Each of them handled the food in their own style. Some tried very carefully to open and clean the egg, and some played around and fought with the food. They constantly communicated with each other during dinner and played while eating. The old man watched these children and noticed that their weight began to increase. Despite the fact that their food supplies were running out, these children still gained weight and became healthy. He took them to the river so that they could play among themselves and feel happy. While the children were playing in the river, Asterix could go to the market and buy fresh corn there. He brought it to the children and told them to stop playing in the water if there was corn. They ate this corn and it turned out to be very tasty. Some children fought with heads of corn. He watched them and realized that every day he spends next to these children brings them closer and he begins to love them. Night fell. The moon illuminated the earth like a big lantern. Grandfather gathered all the children in the room and decided to tell them a bedtime story. The story was about a tiger who saw his prey and ran to hunt it. He parroted this tiger very well and said that if the children do not go to bed then this tiger will eat them. The children were very frightened by such a fairy tale and immediately hid under the blanket so that the evil tiger would not find them. Grandfather started laughing when he saw that the children were so scared. He said that they need to go to bed otherwise this tiger will come and eat them all. They were very scared by this story and immediately hid under the blanket and said that they would immediately go to bed. He lowered his head down and thought about the fact that their food supplies were running out very quickly and he planned to stretch out the food for a few more days. But everything turned out to be much worse than he had planned. The children immediately fell asleep after Grandpa finished telling his story. They were very scared and tired, so they easily managed to fall asleep. He went up to each child and covered him with a blanket. At that moment, he thought that he would do everything possible to ensure that these children never go hungry and feel good. A new day has begun, clouds floated across the sky like ships. The old man gathered all the children near the house and said that today they will have to find a new home for each child. He asked them not to worry, because the people with whom they will live may seem evil to them. But this is only at the beginning, and then they will become a family for them. He looked at the eldest child whose name was Song Yu and thought that there was a blacksmith in the city who could take him as his apprentice. This guy I was still a child but nevertheless, he has a very strong physique and tenacity, these qualities could be useful for a blacksmith, he could be taught everything. He looked at the girl whose name was Yunshin and thought that this girl could be sent to a woman named San Hyaru. He understood that meeting this woman could be very dangerous because he had to give her the money but he had no other choice. He looked at the third child, who was the smartest of all the children, and thought that he could be sent to a tavern to help there and then the child would never go hungry. He understood that he was giving them only because in this case a better life would await them and people who could provide for them could look after them. He said that he no longer has time to be here and needs to go to the city to find new families for the children. He arrived at the place and looked from the top of the mountain at the city that was in front of him. He stood on the edge of the cliff and saw in front of him many buildings in this city. It was his favorite place because from here he could see all the houses. When they approached the city, they heard very loud blows of a hammer on an anvil. The blacksmith worked with his hammer and various tools and created new tools for working in the field. At that moment he was making a new sickle for a man who was working in the field. An old man and his children approached the forge and wanted to talk to the blacksmith. He hit the iron sickle with his hammer and tried to achieve the best possible shape for this tool. The old man approached the blacksmith and greeted him. He said that they had not seen each other for a very long time and he was incredibly glad to meet his old friend. This blacksmith's name was Chan and he looked incredulously at the old man who came to visit him. He was not happy to see him, but the old man still tried to be friendly and asked how he was doing. Chan didn't immediately understand that this man was here for a reason and answered him that he didn't need a worker because he was doing a good job. But the old man understood that he needed to persuade the blacksmith to take on a new apprentice and said that he had a very smart guy who could learn everything very quickly. Chan replied that he didn't need a new worker and there was no work for a blacksmith in the city anyway, much less for an apprentice there was definitely no work to be found. The old man continued to persuade the blacksmith to hire the boy. He tried to explain all the best sides of this boy. But Chan didn't want to listen to anything and simply hit his hammer on the hot sickle in order to even out its shape. He didn't understand how else he could get the attention of this blacksmith. He tried all possible ways to convince him. Chan was starting to get angry because this annoying old man kept trying to persuade him and wouldn't leave here. The children were very worried when they watched this blacksmith. He seemed to them a very scary man. Chan repeated once again that there is no work in the village for the Kuznetsov, he does not need an assistant, but the old man asked just to listen to him. He showed this boy to the blacksmith and said that his name was Song Yu and asked the boy to say hello to his new mentor. The old man said that this is my boy, only 8 years old and his body is not yet strong enough, but if you train him for several years, he will be a good helper and in the future he will be able to become a blacksmith. Chan looked at this guy with a very attentive gaze. he tried to assess this boy's abilities in advance and thought that this could really be a good assistant. The old man looked at the blacksmith and said that this guy Song Yu is a very conscientious and persistent boy, so he will be a good helper. The old man convinced the blacksmith that he would not be able to cope with all the problems alone for a very long time, he would still need an assistant. He said that if this boy is raised well, he will be useful in his work and the blacksmith will not be lonely. The old man said that he could only trust Chan and leave this child to him. Chan closed his eyes and understood that at that moment he needed to make a very important decision. The old man looked at Song Yu and told him that now he would live with this blacksmith and this was his new mentor, but the boy did not want to leave his grandfather. The old man reminded the boy about their conversation near the house and said that it would be better for him if he lived with a new mentor. And for him it would be good because he would have a new skill that would help him earn money for living in the future. The boy was upset because his grandfather wanted to give him to this man and began to pull his sleeve. The old man understood that he needed to show courage and not succumb to childish manipulations, so he pulled out his hand and stepped aside. Song Yu watched as his grandfather left him and took the rest of the children to leave here. He started crying and asked his grandfather not to leave him and to take him with the rest of the children. Song Yu promised that he would behave well and do absolutely everything that grandfather said. He said that he would even eat less if necessary. The old man stood and listened. And all this and his heart was breaking because he was about to abandon the child. The old man began to cry, but he tried to show me his tears so that the children would not see them. He said that he was not abandoning the boy, but was trying to show him a new way to survive for a better life. He started urging the children forward and saying that it was time for them to leave here. Song Yu began to cry and could not stop his tears. He begged his grandfather not to abandon him and not leave him alone here because he was very scared. The boy said that he will eat very little and will help his grandfather with all the housework and may not play at all, but he does not want to stay here. The old man turned his head towards the boy and said that no one was abandoning him, but that they were only trying to help him. He said that it would be better for him. The grandfather tried to explain to the boy that this man is the best blacksmith in the area and if Song Yu is his assistant, then in the future he will be able to earn his living from this craft. But Song Yu didn't want to listen to anything, he just wanted to return home with the rest of the children and live next to his grandfather. The old man could not look at how this boy was crying and came closer to him in order to calm him down. Suddenly, absolutely all the children who were nearby began to cry. They could not come to terms with the fact that their brother would now be taken away from them forever. The old man looked at how all the children began to cry and could not understand how to calm them down. And he felt uneasy because they were so upset. The first child ran up to his grandfather and hugged him and cried. He said that he would behave well and eat little but only so that Song Yu would stay with them. On the other hand, a girl came up to him and took his hand. She cried and looked into her grandfather's eyes, trying to persuade him not to give up their friend. Grandfather started crying and tried to explain to the children that no one was abandoning them and that he was just trying to find them a better life. He sat down on the ground, lowered his head down and said that he was trying to give them the opportunity to be well-fed and live a normal life because with grandfather they would starve. A girl approached him and began to wipe away her grandfather's tears with her hands. Chun said that grandpa doesn't have to worry about food because she will soon grow up and be able to take care of grandpa and the rest of the kids herself. They all ran up to the old man and started hugging him and asked him not to let them go because they love grandfather and don't want to go anywhere. He hugged them all and sobbed, trying to explain that if they didn't go with him now, then they would have to starve and cover themselves with a straw bedding in the winter. In the end, grandfather's heart could not stand it and he melted and decided to take them all with him and not give them to anyone. He said that no matter how hard it was for them, they would still come up with something. They returned home when it was already night. The children were very tired after this hike and they immediately fell asleep when they came home. While the children were sleeping, the old man decided to open the bag of money and see how many coins they had left. He remembered that the blacksmith gave him a bag of money and said that when the boy grows up, he is ready to take him as his assistant and gives this bag of money to feed this child. He went to his room in which there was a large wooden chest. The old man opened this chest and inside it he found a small box that stood right in the center of this chest. He lifted the lid of this box and looked at the contents that were in it. Inside the box there were gold coins and jewelry. There were not many of them, but this was enough for the old man to buy a small field not far from his house and be able to grow food there. This would be enough for them to live. He sat down on the floor next to him. A candle was burning and the old man understood that now the whole meaning of his life lay in these children. He wanted to do everything possible so that they grew up happy people. His only regret was that he had not been able to prepare properly before taking on such a large number of these children, and now he would have to come up with a plan to fix everything. He complicated his task by taking 2 more new children when he was in the city, and now he understands that it was a big mistake. But if he had not taken them, they would have simply died. He stopped being upset and remembered that no one but him was ready to take these children and realized that he needed to save so that they could not survive and live normally in the future. Morning came and the sun was just beginning to appear. It was still very early on the horizon and there was a slight fog near the house. The old man came into the children's room at dawn and said that morning had already come for them to wake up. They were surprised that grandfather woke them up so early. After all, they were not used to getting up at such a time and wanted to get some more sleep. The smallest girl who was recently taken into their group could not wake up and all the children tried to wake her up. But it was pointless. Song Yu asked the other children not to wake up this little girl because she is still very little. The teacher said that she needs to sleep well. While she was sleeping and the other children were clearing out their sleeping places and tidying up the room, the teacher gathered all the children on the street and lined them up in one line. They were still very sleepy and did not understand what was happening. When they saw the teacher in front of them, they did not bow to him and greeted him, but the smallest child did not know the rules and greeted his grandfather differently than everyone else. Bok Gu explained to this child that now he can't call the old man grandfather and all children should call him teacher. He immediately corrected himself and bowed and greeted his teacher once again. The teacher praised the new student and asked him if he slept well today. Chan replied to the teacher that he slept well and felt great. The teacher looked at all the children and said that now they can start training because he saw that they were already ready. Today the teacher gave them a task to practice even with a fist. He taught basic martial arts techniques and wanted them to learn how to defend themselves. Martial art, this is all that the master could do, and that's why he decided to teach his craft to children. He showed them every movement and the children repeated after him. When he finished the combination, he immediately started it again and the children had to repeat this until they started to succeed. At some point, after several hours of training, they still began to get punches and were able to remember the combination. At some point, children who were older began to learn military techniques faster, but those who were younger began to forget what they needed to do. He thought that these children would need to be counted according to seniority. After all, it would be more convenient to watch them and teach them. He faced a problem because Wu Ram was the eldest child, but Song Yu is better able to cope with these tasks and Song Yu has leadership qualities. They trained almost all day and teacher said that now the time has come when I can't rest. He taught them a breathing technique that would help their body restore strength and the children tried to master this technique. He asked them to take a short breath and exhale long. And even if it was hard for them, they still needed to calm down and try to do exactly as he said because this could help them in the future. Each of them understood the task that grandfather gave them in their own way, but nevertheless, everyone tried hard to complete these tasks and learn everything that grandfather said. The teacher taught this breathing practice to children so that they could not get rid of illness. It was the safest breathing practice. Xiu Yo was the youngest student and she slept through the entire training session because she was very tired lately. Grandfather prepared a bowl of rice for the children. It was the only food they could afford, but nevertheless he tried to make it tasty. He took the spoon in his hand and told the children that they could start eating and wished everyone a bon appetit. One guy was very hungry and he ate a bowl of rice so quickly that the rest of the children hadn't even started eating yet. The teacher was very surprised when he saw that this boy ate his food so quickly. He realized that this child was very hungry. He decided that he would give him half of his food so that the boy would have a normal dinner. He understood that if he skimped on food and fed them only rice, then their muscles and bones would not grow, so he had to find a job for himself and decided to soon go to the city to look for this job. Song Yu saw the teacher leaving the room and asked him to stay because he wanted to talk about important things that worried him. The boy was embarrassed to talk about it, but he still asked his grandfather not to make him a senior student. The teacher was surprised by this decision and wanted to know why the boy was asking him about this, and Song Yu said that Ram is older than him and he deserves to be the eldest student. The teacher replied that he determined the rating not by age based on leadership qualities, and Song Yu is the eldest student because he is the best suited for this position and the rest of the students are distributed by age. The boy did not understand why his grandfather decided to give him such a position and how he was different from other children. The teacher said that he distributed the children according to positions as he sees fit in accordance with Myeon Moon, and all children must treat the older student with respect. They all listened to their teacher and nodded their heads in agreement. They said that they would respect and treat Song Yu. Everything the old man did was just to make them feel good. He understood that all these children are from different families, so they can go astray, but when there is a connection between the students, everything will be different. He remembered that once he was also the elder head of the clan, but he decided not to tell this to the children because they would start laughing at it. They collected water from the big iron casinos in buckets so that they could have drinking water. Song Yu was the first to fill the bucket with water and made sure that all the other children did not have problems with it. But one boy had trouble getting water into a bucket. His hands were very weak and he didn't have enough strength to hold the bucket. The fifth student began to call the second student names because he was unable to fill the bucket with water. Song Yu scolded the fifth student and said that this is no way to communicate with younger brothers, and if something doesn't work out for them, you need to help them. The fifth student was dissatisfied with the fact that this guy always carries very little water, unlike the others, and because of him the others have to work twice as hard. Song Yu said that one should not scold the second student for the fact that something does not work out for him, because he is more important in terms of seniority and one should not underestimate his importance. Song Yu walked with the second student and carried water in buckets home. Song Yu told the second student that he had good talent in writing and decided to offer him a new lesson. He said that the rest of the students did not know how to write and read, and therefore it would be easier for them to help the second student learn to read and write, and then he could teach everyone else. The second student said that he could carry water and learn writing, but Song Yu stopped him and said that everyone is good at one thing. Song Yu said that today the teacher will buy a book in the city and bring it home, and the second student will be able to learn writing instead of carrying water with the rest of the students. He tried to explain to the boy that if he studied grammar and learned to write then he would become a great man, but the boy did not understand how he would study it. Song Yu calmed the second student and said that everything would be fine, and the rest of the students believed in him. The teacher went to the big city to find at least some work here and earn money. In the city he found a building familiar to him called the tea house. He immediately decided to go there. A woman in a purple kimono was sitting in a tea house and trying to cool herself by waving her fan. It was very hot today. There was no one in the establishment except her, and she spent the whole day trying to fight with her wife who was on the street. She heard that someone came into the room and thought that it was a new client, so she immediately greeted him, but when she raised her head and saw that it was an unusual client, she saw a man who came to her in the establishment and immediately recognized him. It was her old friend Boyaka. He smiled when he saw his friend and said that he was glad to meet her again. She said that she had not seen him for a long time, although many people in this area knew about him and asked why he was here now because people said that he quit his job. Boyaka said that he actually finished his work a long time ago. He completed his last order and retired. She smiled and said that not all people are able to retire from such a serious job, but she was glad that her brother was able to do it. He asked his sister how is her trade going. And she said that before it was better here because there were constant battles and wars, people came to her for tea, but now it's peaceful and calm here and there are no visitors. She replied that all the traders who were in this city for a very long time had to work for Murim. She said that crime in this city has been stopped since the new ruler came here. Because of this, new warriors do not come to her and she has practically no profit. She looked at the man and said that he most likely came here to find a job, and Boyaka asked the girl if she had any part-time work for him. She said that he doesn't work very much now in these parts, but she can find some kind of work for him, but she needed to know what difficulty of work he chooses. He said that he was ready to take on work of the highest complexity because he needed money, and the woman was very surprised by this answer. She didn't understand what was happening. Her brother always took on simple and medium difficulty tasks, but he replied that he really needed money now. She thought that he was a very strong man, but taking on a high-level job could be very difficult for him. She asked her brother when he was ready to start, and Boyaka replied that he was ready to start work at any time but asked to exclude assignments in other areas. She told him that she had one task, but it would only need to be completed in 2 weeks. Boyaka was glad that his sister found him a job and thanked her for this. He said that he could always rely on her. Boyaka could no longer linger here. He needed to go back to the children, so he thanked the girl again and went to the exit. She thought about the fact that she got married too early, and most likely because of this she is so worried about this big child. She was very surprised that Boyaka took on a high level of difficulty in completing the task. It was not like him. He returned to his home, and on that day the weather was beautiful. The sun was shining very bright, but thanks to the clouds it was not very hot. As the sun rises, dew begins to appear on the leaves of trees and bushes. Boyaka gathered all his students for a new training and ordered them to warm up. After training, they all went to a river that flowed near large rocks and began to play in the water. It was a very hot and pleasant summer that will forever remain in their memory. They played in the water and made life happy. It was a carefree time that will not always be remembered. The second student sat next to the teacher all the time and studied the books that his grandfather gave him. Boyaka decided to spend part of his saved money to buy a field. Now that autumn was coming, the children could harvest and sow this field. They grew little by little when autumn came and did not feel that the next year had already begun. In winter, children tried to stay indoors more and in order not to get sick and tried to warm each other. Boyaka spent all his free time with the children. He played with them, taught them something new and watched them grow. He was very happy that these children felt happy and was glad that their lives were getting better. Then night came, snow continued to fall from the sky and all the children were already asleep at that moment. The moon shone very brightly that night and illuminated the room of the second student. While the rest of the students were sleeping in their beds, the second student was studying books using natural light from the moon so that he could read. It came again, or did it mean that now is the best time to start working in the field? It was necessary to prepare the field in order to sow it, and for this I had to work all day long. Song Yu worked alone because he felt that he had a lot of strength and energy. The other children were resting at that moment and he took on great responsibility. He knew that in a few days he would finish working in the field, and when he received the money, he would be able to buy clothes for the youngest student and some paper for the second student. Suddenly he heard the voice of the teacher who called him to him. The boy was surprised that the teacher appeared here. He saw his grandfather standing in the forest and was glad to see him. Boyaka was also very happy to meet his senior student here and see that this guy works all day. Song Yu said that the teacher returned much earlier than planned and asked what this was connected with. The grandfather did not answer anything, he was just holding bags of food in his hands. Song Yu was very happy that the teacher returned earlier than promised, but suddenly he noticed something very strange. He saw that the teacher had a weapon cut on his hand, and what happened to him? Boyaka did not answer the guy's question and said that his hands would fall off to hold all these bags, so he asked the guy to take them for himself. Song Yu apologized for not immediately understanding that he needed to pick up the bags and helped his grandfather lighten his load. Boyaka asked the senior student what happened during his absence and were there any problems. Song Yu replied that everything was fine with them and didn't even know what to tell the teacher because nothing special happened. This news pleased the old man and he said that it was time for them to go home. Boyaka said that starting tomorrow he will help the first student work in the field. Song Yu was very concerned about the teacher's behavior. He acted very calmly and acted as if nothing had happened. But the boy still asked the old man one more time and asked where he got this fresh wound. The teacher said it was a minor scratch and not worth worrying about. Song Yu was very worried that every time the teacher goes to the city on business and then returns with a new wound. Boyaka didn't know what to answer to his student and simply decided to remain silent and look at the guy. He was very glad that this boy was worried about his health. He stroked his head with his hand and said that the guy had already grown up to take care of his teacher. Boyaka said it was just a small scratch, but if he didn't get it he wouldn't be making money and he shouldn't worry about it. The teacher said that he could carry the boy on his back like in childhood, but the guy refused because he said that he was no longer so light and it would be difficult for the teacher. Boyaka started laughing with the older student and said that when he was little and he constantly asked the teacher to carry him on his back. The teacher came home and showed the children all the purchases he had made in the city. They were delighted because there were jerky meats and many different interesting things. The children were very happy to see the teacher's return, did not hug him and tried to spend as much time with him as possible. Song Yu could not calm down. He was constantly worried about the teacher's health and did not understand why the teacher returned with a new wound every time. He noticed that the teacher always behaves the same way, no matter what difficulties he has to overcome. He gives the children absolutely everything he has and leaves nothing for himself. He can spend all his money and energy on students giving gifts and trying to make them all happy. But he himself constantly wears old things that should have been thrown out a long time ago and bought new ones, but he doesn't spend money on himself because he wants to make his students happy. Many people would be afraid to walk around in such old and dirty things because they would be laughed at on the street. But the teacher prefers to buy the second student a new book instead of buying clothes for himself. Every day he is losing weight more and more and it is already starting to catch the eye. Anyone can notice that grandfather is spending all his energy on them. Song Yu thought about the fact that he wants to become an adult quickly and help his grandfather live a good life and help all his brothers. When he becomes an adult he will be able to repay his grandfather for everything he did for them and then everything will work out for them. Autumn had come and the leaves were falling from the trees and the weather was becoming very gloomy. The teacher again went on a new assignment and left his house. The senior student saw him off. Boyaka told the older student that it was already very cold outside and asked him to return home so that he would not freeze. Song Yu, I am very surprised that the teacher is going on a new assignment and will work all winter and autumn. Boyaka said that he should be grateful that they now have work, and besides, he was able to take a lot of rice with him and would not die of hunger during this time. Song Yu said that there is no point in the teacher going to work all winter because blacksmith Chan will take the boy to work starting next year. The teacher replied that this would happen later, but now they still need to earn money so that younger students can eat normally. Song Yu was very worried about the teacher and worried that nothing bad would happen to him. After all, he is already old. The teacher said that the book that the second student Ram is reading is already tattered and unsuitable for learning because he constantly works with it and the teacher wants to earn money to buy him new books. Song Yu was still worried about the teacher and said that his health was no longer the same as before, he could harm himself if he worked all winter. Boyaka was very glad that the older student was so worried about him, but nevertheless he said that everything would be fine and for him it was not difficult. He patted the older student on the head and told him to take care of the younger students because now he remains in charge here. The teacher told her that the older student could not look worried because the rest of the students would start to worry for no reason. After these words, he said goodbye to the boy and went on his way. Ram was sitting in his room when all the other students were already asleep. He was worried that the teacher had left again and did not know when he would return back. The only thing he knew for sure was that he had to succeed in learning writing in order for the teacher to be proud. He had to become the best in this matter and then teach all the other students. A lot of time has passed since the teacher left the house, the weather has become good again, spring has come. The students meditated every day in a large room under the guidance of a senior student. The fifth student was very distracted and prevented the other students from meditating because he tickled them. He asked the younger student how he was feeling and the boy replied that his stomach still hurt as before. The fifth student suggested that the boy tell his senior student about his stomach pain, but the boy refused because calling a doctor is very expensive and they don't have that much money. He tried to explain to the younger one that the older student should take care of the problems of the younger students. The fifth student asked the boy to tell him immediately when the younger one started to have a stomach ache. It was important for him that the younger one notified him about it. Song Yu asked all the other students to calm down and focus on training. The younger students felt very guilty for being distracted from training and disturbing others. Song Yu that day also could not concentrate on practicing meditation because various thoughts entered his head and distracted him. He understood that the teacher should have returned, but he still hasn't. It's been a long time and something could have happened to him. Song Yu was worried about this because they were running out of food and had no money to buy new food. He decided to tell the rest of the children the news that he heard from the village people. They say that the barbarians are now attacking the village. The children were very scared and they heard that the barbarians could attack their village. Song Yu said that these barbarians are ruthless non-humans and kill everyone who gets in their way. For them it doesn't matter at all who is in front of them, an old man, a woman, or children. They treat everyone the same and kill and rob. He told me the younger students that there was no teacher next to them now and therefore they needed to be especially careful and he understood that the protection of the rest of the students rested on his shoulders. He said that Chun, Yul and Young should stay at home all the time and take care of the order in the house. After that, he looked at the fifth student and said that he and Bok Gu would work together to get water and firewood, even though it would be very difficult. Bok Gu didn't like this idea because it would be very difficult for two to carry water and handle firewood, and he asked what the second student would do during this time. Ram felt very awkward sitting at the table. Everyone paid attention to him and he realized that he was doing the least amount of housework. Song Yu said that the second student should study writing and go to Soton. He needed to study and had no time for other activities. Bok Gu was very unhappy with this decision because he would now have to work twice as hard as before. Ram felt like the most useless student and invited the eldest student to help them. But Song Yu said that the second student should teach the others how to write. Song Yu missing even one day of school will slow down his learning for a whole year and therefore he should not miss classes. He understood that if the second student did household chores, then he would have no time to study at all. Song Yu forbade the girls to go outside. This was a new rule in this house. He was worried that something might happen to them and could not put them in danger. After that, he expressed everything he needed and said that they could start eating. The children were very hungry after a hard day at work and very quickly barely ate the food that the senior student gave them. Night fell and the moon again began to illuminate the earth like a large lantern. Song Yu decided to visit the second student at night. At that moment Ram was studying a book. Ram asked his older brother why he came so late because it was almost morning and Sun Yu replied that he had a lot to do if he didn't level the ground in the fields now and then it would be too late. Ram said I can also help the older student and do everything you can. Song Yu said that they had already discussed this topic and the second student should study books because this is much more important. Song Yu asked the second student why he still did not go to bed and Ram answered him that he hardly moved today so he was not tired. Song Yu asked the second student to go to bed and rest because he needed to gain strength to study books and sleep at least 4 hours. Ram said that he was very worried about the older student because he sleeps very little. But the guy told him that a strong body is all he has and he must have time to work in the field so that they have food. Song Yu said that he is very concerned about the health of the younger student because he now has a fever and needs to show him to the doctor. Song Yu began to change clothes and said that the younger student gets a fever every time after training and he knows that no one wants to tell him about this so as not to bother him, he will still need to be taken to the doctor. Ram was very surprised when he saw the muscles of the senior student. He could not believe that this guy had pumped up so much during this time. Song Yu worked alone in the field from the very morning to prepare the land for new sowing. He worked almost without rest in order to get everything done. His body was very strong and he was able to work for a long time. He perceived work on the field as a separate type of training in which he strengthens his body. He said that it was much more effective than just standing in the equestrian position all day. He thought about the fact that younger brothers are constantly learning something new and becoming better. But for now he is still the strongest student because he is older than them. Suddenly the guy heard strange sounds coming from the forest. He immediately paid attention to them and decided to see what was happening there. Song Yu hid on the ground so that he could not be noticed. Thus, he tried to follow the people who were approaching him. He saw that masked warriors began to approach their village. They were armed with spears and rode on horses. The horses galloped very fast and there were many of them. The leader of the barbarians informed the rest of his warriors that they must find the girl today. Song Yu looked at these people in fear and realized that these were the same barbarians that the people in the settlement were talking about. He understood that this was very bad news because the barbarians were already very close to their home. He became very interested in what girl they were talking about, who they wanted to find. Song Yu realized that they had already run far enough and could continue working on the field because he had no time to waste. The sun was directly in the center of the sky and it was the hottest part of the day. Song Yu heard strange sounds again. He realized that some person was approaching him. And he decided to look at this person. It was a tall beautiful girl with long white hair wearing red-black clothes. She was very upset and worried about something. Her red eyes were cast down. Song Yu was very scared when he saw this girl here. He understood that it was dangerous to be here. He tried to stop her and said that she couldn't be here and it was better for her to leave here as soon as possible. She didn't understand why this boy was so worried about her being here, but the guy didn't have time to explain it to her. He took her hand and began to drag her along and said that this was a very dangerous place for her and he would try to explain everything later. He took the girl to a barn that was located not far from the field and said that it was better for her to sit here and not make a sound. Song Yu asked this stranger to stay here and not come out, because it would be better for her. She listened to the boy's words and did not sit in this barn. But I still didn't understand why he hid her here. Song Yu didn't want the barbarians to notice this girl and do something bad to her. He continued to work on the field and pretended that nothing had happened. He still needed to level a lot of land in order to prepare it for the season. The sun began to approach the horizon, which meant that evening would soon come. Song Yu again heard a herd of horses approaching in the distance. He understood that they were barbarians. They returned back and could not find who they were looking for. Suddenly the leader of the barbarians saw a child working in the field and thought that he could talk to him. He ran up to him on his horse and stopped, then asked the boy if he had seen a woman here. Song Yu said that he works in the field all day and hasn't seen any woman here. The barbarians began to communicate with each other and discuss a girl who should be somewhere nearby. They said that they had never seen such a beautiful girl before, so they wanted to get her. The leader of the barbarians did not personally see this girl and heard about her only from stories from his soldiers and asked one of the barbarians how beautiful she was. The warrior who saw her said that this is the best girl he has ever seen. One of the barbarians got down from his horse and approached the boy. He told him that if the boy was lying to them about the fact that he had not seen the girl, then they would kill him. Song Yu was very scared when he heard this barbarian shouting at him but still said that he didn't see anyone here. This answer made Varvara very angry and he raised his hand to the boy. He hit the guy in the face with his palm as hard as he could. Song Yu felt very strong pain from this blow and flew to the side. He fell to the ground, and the barbarian at that moment said that this boy was lying to them because there was no other road here and it definitely had to pass here. The barbarian was sure that this boy was not telling the truth, because of this he wanted to kill him right here and now. Song Yu continued to hide the truth and answered the barbarians that he actually did not see anyone here and tried to prove to them that he was not lying. But the evil barbarian did not like this boy's answer and he began to kick him. While this scumbag was beating a weak boy, the rest of the barbarians watched this and laughed. The leader of the barbarians said that this guy is the biggest scumbag from their gang because he beats women and children. Song Yu continued to receive blows from this barbarian but still did not tell the truth because he was worried about what they could do to this woman. At that moment the girl was in the barn and through the doorway she saw everything that was happening on the street. She watched how these barbarians beat the boy, but he still continues to be a doctor and does not talk about where she is. Song Yu tried to cover his head with his hands so that it would not hurt him so much, but they still continued to beat him. The barbarian said that this boy, apparently, really didn't see this girl, maybe he was so stupid that he just didn't notice her. The leader of the barbarians said that they cannot waste any more time on this stupid boy and need to find this girl as quickly as possible. They went further in search of this girl. The boy at that moment was lying on the ground and was in very severe pain. He lay on the ground and trembled because his body hurt very much after Varvara knocked him down. The girl who was hiding in the barn finally realized that she could come out and decided to approach the boy. She sat down next to him and began stroking his shoulders with her hand to make him feel at least a little better. She said that this boy is already the second person who tried to protect her and suffered for it. She turned her head back and saw that the barbarians had already run away very far and were not even visible on the horizon. Night came. That night there was a month in the sky and there were hundreds of stars around it. In the barbarian camp that night there was a meeting, bright lights were burning, all these thugs gathered in one place. One barbarian sat in the center of them and everyone else stood around him and watched him suffer. The rest of the barbarians laughed at this guy because he told them about a beautiful girl, but they never found her and because of this he was punished. The leader of the barbarians drank alcohol from a bottle and said that because of this idiot he had to ride horses all day to swallow dust and all this was to no avail. The leader of the barbarians accused this guy of slander in front of everyone because he dared to collect information about a girl who in fact they could not find. But suddenly in the distance a silhouette of a beautiful girl appeared who was approaching the central gate. The barbarian who was accused of lying and beaten turned his head to the side and saw this girl. He shouted to all the other barbarians that this was the girl he saw this morning and she had now come here. For the other barbarians, it was very surprising that at such a time a girl decided to come here absolutely. She was very calm and was not afraid of these barbarians. She came here all alone and it was a very strange act from a girl. The barbarians began to behave like natives when they saw such a beautiful girl in their camp. She came out to the center and the camp and stopped. The girl turned her head to the side and looked at the barbarian with a beaten face who was sitting on the ground. She immediately understood what was happening here but still behaved very calmly, despite the fact that these barbarians looked like wild monkeys. The leader of the barbarians looked at this girl and could not take his eyes off her. Drool was flowing from his mouth and he asked where such a beautiful woman appeared in their camp. She counted all the savages who were in this camp and said that there were 54 people here and not one of them could escape from here. The leader of the barbarians asked this girl what she meant but immediately after 1 second his head was cut off. She killed the leader of the barbarians in front of all the other members of this sect. They did not understand what was happening and therefore immediately began to grab their weapons and run to attack her. With quick blows of the sword, all these barbarians were destroyed in a few seconds. They didn't even have time to understand anything. In fact, the girl did not come here on her own and she was in the company of experienced warriors who were masters of the sword and killed all these barbarians like real professionals. One barbarian whom the rest of the barbarians just wanted to execute remained alive and watched as all the members of his gang were killed in an instant. She came closer to this barbarian and he began to shake with fear. he understood that something very terrible was about to happen. She leaned closer to him and said that she would have a completely different conversation with this scumbag and she wanted to talk to him separately. And when he heard this, he became so scared that he turned pale and realized that a very terrible torture awaited him. The sun came out from behind the horizon and began, and she was already in sight behind the rocks. Song Yu woke up first. At that time the rest of the children were still sleeping. He felt that his body was in great pain after being beaten by this barbarian. It had already been several days since this event happened, but his body still hurt. Oh, looked at the rest of the students. He was very glad that they were sleeping so well and soundly. He was glad that these guys were resting well. But when he began to count all the students, he saw that one student was missing and was afraid because something could happen to him. But then he realized that the second student most likely woke up earlier than everyone else in order to go study new books, and the guy realized that he also needed to go to work. He took his tools and clothes to go to work in the field. He is already accustomed to the fact that he goes out to work on the field before everyone else, when the steel students are still sleeping, and returns when they are already asleep. Before leaving, he looked at the guys who were resting sweetly in bed and said that they, too, should work well today. The sun was already in the center of the sky and it was the hottest part of the day. Song Yu continued, as always, to work alone in the field and prepare the land for the new season in order to plant vegetables here. When he was working, he didn't notice that there was anyone else on the field besides him, but suddenly a girl appeared. She approached the guy and called him. The boy heard a woman's voice and turned his head towards her. He saw this girl and realized that this was the same girl that he had hidden from the barbarians. Because of her he had big problems. He didn't understand why she came here again, because it's very dangerous to be here. If the barbarians return, they'll have big problems again. She looked carefully at this boy and realized that this was the same hero who saved her, and he also very much reminded her of one person. This boy was very similar to her older brother whom she loved very much, and he remained in her memory. She asked the boy how he was feeling and if everything was okay with him, because he had committed a great stupidity when he protected her. She took his face with her hands and began to examine the monitor lizards. She said that because of his stupidity he could have died. Song Yu didn't understand why this girl said that because he saved her and thought that she would behave differently. She told him that it is not worth fighting with an opponent who is several times stronger than him, and that it is better to fall to the ground and just hide until he becomes stronger than the enemy. Song Yu didn't understand why this girl was talking like that. Everything he was thinking about then, this or that to save their lives. She said that this boy has people he must protect, and such a brave act could harm the people who depend on him. Song Yu thanked her for the advice and bowed to her. The girl said that she had been watching him and knew that he was engaged in martial arts. He told this girl that he had a teacher who told him that he should not miss a single day of training. And the girl was very surprised that this boy had a teacher, and she asked what school he belongs to. He said that he studies the Million Moon School of Martial Arts and his name is Song Yu and he is the 18th student of this school. She was very surprised when she heard the light of this boy's information. She immediately realized that their purr was a charlatan or a fake. Song Yu called this girl sister and asked her if she practices martial arts. She was very surprised that he called her sister and asked why he said that. He laughed and started scratching his head. He told her that he couldn't call her grandma, and miss also sounded very strange. She started laughing, and I thought this boy was very cute and good, but I thought that he was a golden child. She was touched by the fact that this cute boy was talking to her so funny. She asked this boy to call her aunt, and this was very unexpected for Song Yu because he saw her for the second time in his life. She looked at him and thought that she definitely wouldn't be a grandmother for him because she was still too young, but her aunt was best suited in this situation. She smiled and said that since she is already an aunt to him, then she will have to take care of her nephew, and Song Yu at that moment felt very awkward. She asked the guy to show his skills in martial arts because he so confidently stated that he was a student of the Million Moon School, and she was interested to see what he was capable of. She asked him if he was ready to show his skills in martial arts. Song Yu was delighted and said that he would be happy to show her everything he knew. He was very glad that someone was interested in seeing his abilities. The boy began to accumulate chi energy in himself in order to fill his body with the right energy. He began to move his right hand and prepare it for an attack. He clenched his hand into a fist and began to feel the strength in his hand. Song Yu showed the combination of blows that the teacher showed them. He knew this combination better than others. Ant carefully watched the boy's movements and analyzed his technique in martial arts. She found this boy very interesting. Song Yu began to make movements with his legs and showed the blows that he had learned. He concentrated all his attention on these blows and did not worry about the fact that someone was watching him. His movements were very clear and fast. After he finished his combination, he got into a fighting position and began to accumulate energy. The ant saw how the boy tried to show her the blows that he learned from his teacher, but she understood that this was absolutely not a martial art, but just strange movements. She was very impressed that this boy spends a lot of time training every day and puts his soul into this activity, but he only managed to learn the basics of martial arts. He said that he can't fight very well with his bare hands, but with the help of a stick he fights better, and the girl said that this is very good and praised him. Song Yu was very surprised when this girl praised him and he asked, "Is he really worthy of praise?" She answered him that her aunt had never lied to anyone in her life and said that the boy's breathing technique was similar to the Taoist technique. She saw that his martial art is nothing special, but he is very proud of it. If she tells him the truth, she will obviously be upset. She understood that his teacher did not understand anything about martial arts, but he worked correctly with the spirit of this boy. She asked him if he wanted to know something very interesting. Song Yu was very interested in this proposal and replied that he was looking forward to his aunt telling him this. She said that if the boy slightly changed the breathing technique that he had learned, he would fight much better, his movements would become clearer. She put her hand on his stomach and asked him not to worry and just trust her. Auntie told him to inhale air when she presses her hand on his stomach and exhale air when she removes her hand. He felt very strange because he had known this girl only recently and she was already helping him master his breathing. She pressed her hand on his stomach and he took a breath. Then Nu pressed his stomach again and he took another breath. Her hand began to glow with a bright light and she once again pressed his stomach and asked him to take another deep breath. After that, she removed her hand and said that now he could finally exhale, and the boy exhaled. She said that if he remembered the breathing pattern and trained it, he would be able to feel something rising through his body. The aunt said that the boy should feel this something inside himself and work until this something rises to his head. All this time he must continue to breathe and not worry about the fact that something might go wrong, he just must train and work. She said that the most difficult thing is patience, but if he can constantly train it then he will have good results. She raised her hand up and said that he would succeed, and when he was able to free himself, he would feel completely different. Song Yu didn't understand what was happening now, it all looked very strange and for some reason this girl was helping him, he was watching how she was moving now, it looked very interesting. He watched the movement of her hands and it seemed to him that she was moving very quickly. She hit her palms on the ground and a dent appeared in the ground. These are her hands. Song Yu understood that he needed to have incredible strength in order to leave such a large dent in the ground, and he did not understand how such a fragile girl was capable of such a thing. But she continued to move her hands and show him her capabilities. Her movements were so fast and clear that she was able to cause a very strong flow of wind that threw the guy to the side. Song Yu was delighted when he saw that this ant was able to summon the wind from her palms. He said that he wanted to learn how to do this. She smiled and thought that it was possible to interest a child in such an easy way. And she told him that he could learn this if he trained his breathing, but he would have to work hard. Song Yu smiled and said that he would put a lot of effort into learning how to release the wind from his palms. She was very surprised that this boy was so active. He reminded her more and more of her older brother. The aunt said that they would teach the boys several martial art techniques that could help him in the future. She asked him to carefully observe his breathing and said that he needed to concentrate his breathing in one place. Auntie put her hands together and made a red fire sphere appear in her hands. She began to make circular movements with her hands and increase the power of this sphere that was in her hands. Aunt made a sharp movement with her hands forward, and after that the sphere began to increase even more. She sent red fire spheres and all the energy forward, and after that an explosion occurred. Song Yu had never seen anything like this before. The power of her fighting technique was incredibly strong and the boy tried to follow her every move. Song Yu thought that his aunt showed him the technique of breathing and movement and it looked very simple, but in practice he still did not understand how to do it correctly. She took his hand and tried to give him the correct pose and stance in which it would be easier to do this exercise. She said that great power is not as simple as it might seem. She asked the boy not to show this technique to anyone until he himself learned to use it easily. Song Yu repeated every movement that this girl showed him and he tried to give his best so as not to miss anything and do everything right. The aunt asked the boy to remember a very important phrase that mismanagement of talent can cause anger. He promised her that he would train until it became natural for him and until he completely mastered this technique. Song Yu said that he forgot to ask her something very important. The girl asked what he could mean and the boy replied that he wanted to know the name of this martial art. Aunt said that there is no name for this martial art because she created it herself after looking at the situation she was in, and the title for this technique does not make sense because it is improvised. Song Yu said that this is very cool. He said that the teacher sometimes told them a story about heroes and their techniques were called Heavenly Dragon or 18 Truths, and he was always delighted with these names. She laughed, because this boy seemed very cute to her. She said that the name of the technique is a way to describe its content. After this, Aunt made a serious expression on her face and said that this technique can be called murder. Song Yu was scared when he heard the name of this military technique and he did not think that techniques could be called such terrible words. She explained why this technique is called that way. After all, if a person uses his hand while using this technique, then he must kill the enemy or make sure that the enemy cannot resist. She said that this is the only way to guarantee your safety, which means that the boy must think 3 times before using this technique because there will be no turning back. Song Yu promised that he would use this technique carefully and would always take it seriously. But my aunt also asked that she never tell anything about this martial arts technique because it is secret. Song Yu was very surprised when he heard such a request from this girl. He said that he has several students whom he teaches martial arts and asked if he could show them this technique. But she forbade him to do this, explained this by the fact that she wants to repay the boy for saving him, but does not want to raise killers, and if he does not keep his promise, she will cut off his hand, and said that the aunt never lies. Song Yu was scared when he heard that his hand could be cut off and he felt very embarrassed. He didn't want his hand to be cut off. Aunt leaned her head closer to him and said that the boy could show his students the breathing technique that she showed him. And then she said that she had something else for the boys as a token of gratitude. She put her hand in the inside pocket of her jacket and tried to reach something. She pulled out a beautiful expensive ring from her pocket and said that she would give it to the boy as a gift if he had big problems with money and poverty began, then he could go to the largest store in the village to sell this ring. Song Yu was scared when he saw such an expensive gift. He said that he didn't need this decoration, it would be superfluous because his aunt taught him so much. She was very persistent and put the ring in his hand. Aunt said that when adults give something, you just need to accept it. She asked him to put in more effort so that he would learn all the combat techniques that she taught him as best as possible, and he said that he would definitely do it. She looked at this guy for the last time before leaving. She thought that she did everything possible to help this boy. After all, he has a very kind heart, and said that she would like to see him again someday. Song Yu all this time looked at the expensive ring that his aunt gave him and could not believe that she was so kind and ready to give him such an expensive thing. He was so carried away by this ring that he forgot that the girl was somewhere nearby all this time when he raised his head and was no longer there, and he began to scream and call her. She disappeared so quickly as if she had never been here. This girl looked like a ghost who could disappear at any moment, and the boy did not understand how she did it. But he had her ring in his hands and he understood that she had actually just been here, and he promised himself that he would never forget her and would fulfill all her requests. Song Yu returned to his home with the rest of the guys and they were all in the courtyard of their house. The second student drew some drawings on the ground with a wooden stick. He tried very carefully to draw every line, and he had a book in his hands. He drew hieroglyphs to show the other guys what symbols are. The second student wrote a phrase on the ground that means that everyone has shortcomings and knowing your shortcomings you need to correct them immediately. He said that these were words that they needed to learn today and promised that he would help every student if they had questions. One of the students began to scratch his head and said that he did not understand why he should learn these symbols because he would never use them. Song Yuda started yelling at this guy and said that there is a huge difference between not knowing and not using something and explained that the letter needs to be studied and not necessarily used, so he asked him to stop being capricious. The boy was upset because an older student had just yelled at him and said that he would learn all these hieroglyphs. The second student saw that Bok Gu was now very upset and realized that he needed a little support so that he would not be disappointed in the letter and, on the contrary, would get excited about studying the letter. He approached the boy and began to help him write these hieroglyphs correctly, but the boy did not quite understand why the second student was doing this. He asked the fifth student to carefully monitor his movements and try to draw a hieroglyph with him. The second student drew his name with him, which sounds like Bok Gu. He asked the boy if he knew what his name meant. Bok Gu replied that he does not know the meaning of his name and does not know what these characters mean. At this moment, the second student explained that his name means strength and the letter is just a way to express it. He explained that his parents knew about the meaning of this name and that's why they named the boy because his name meant blessing and his parents thought that he could receive 9 blessings in his life. The students listened carefully to what the second student was saying and he explained to them that learning hieroglyphs is difficult, so many do not know them, but if they learn to have knowledge that others do not have, then they will have more opportunities. The girls also listened to him carefully and the second student explained that they can eat more delicious food and have the opportunity to sleep in a more comfortable place if they know something that others don't know. Bok Gu finally understood what the second student was talking about and stopped being capricious. He said that they should study because it will lead them to a good life. One of the students was very happy about your idea and he started smiling. He saw the fourth student smiling and asked him if he had already learned everything and that's why he was laughing at Bok Gu. The second student explained that this boy's name Chi Sim means sincere knowledge. Therefore, he needs to learn more than anyone else because his name already speaks about it. The second student said that they are very good at learning hieroglyphs, but they still need to try as hard as possible to learn it all quickly and said that it all depends on their actions. He hoped that all the students would be able to understand this and would study well in the future because he was worried about every student. For the second student, the most important mission in life was to share his knowledge with these guys because he dreamed that they would have a good life in the future. They all shouted in unison that they would study well and promised the second brother that they would learn these hieroglyphs. Chi Sim didn't even have time to write 2 hieroglyphs, but he saw that the younger student had already written about 10 and he asked how he did it. And the younger student replied that he remembered it the first time. The second student knew that it was not easy for him to study the book and the paper was very expensive, the teacher and brother tried to get them for him. Therefore, he had to study well. He knew that he had to succeed in his studies and become the best student in order to later teach his brothers and sisters. The next day came and Song Yu gathered all the children in the yard to begin teaching them using the breathing technique that his aunt showed him. The student sat in the lotus position and tried to breathe correctly using a new technique that the senior student showed them. Chi Sim tried to perform the correct breathing technique but he couldn't. He said that he was starting to choke and asked why he needed to breathe like that. Song Yu tried to explain to this student that if he learns to breathe correctly using this technique, then he will be able to create wind with his own hands. Chi Sim scratched his head and said that this is a very good skill, but it's still hard for him to breathe like that and his chest is very hard. The senior student explained to the boy that if he continues to train and does not give up, then this feeling will pass and he will succeed. Song Yu noticed that not all students find training their body an exciting activity and it will be good if interest in this activity increases over time. The younger student raised his hand and said that he had an important question for the older student. Song Yu went up to the baby and asked what happened, but the boy told him that his stomach hurt a lot and asked him not to do this exercise. Song Yu put his hand on his stomach and felt that his stomach was actually very hot and asked if the boy was in pain now and how he was feeling. I'll explain to the boy that it doesn't hurt him now, but when his stomach gets warm it starts to hurt and he doesn't like it. Song Yu asked what kind of pain he was experiencing in his stomach and did it look like his stomach was starting to hurt. He thought that this might be exactly the feeling his aunt had told him about. When she taught him this technique, she asked him to inhale and exhale air and placed her hand on his stomach. Song Yu breathed a lot that day under her control and also experienced strange sensations. That day he felt this because his aunt did something to his body and this baby now has exactly the same sensations. The aunt then said that first the boy should feel a light touch and energy, that's where it all begins, and this feeling can be developed and improved. Song Yu focused all his attention that day on the word of energy and thought that this was the key to unlocking this skill. He realized that the younger student had already begun to use this breath correctly and perhaps his stomach hurt due to the touch of this energy. Song Yu walked up to the boy and scratched his head. He said that a warm belly is good and you shouldn't worry about it, but if the boy is worried, then he can't rush to learn breathing techniques. He understood that he had to do this technique better than them in order to understand it and so that he could help them. It's moments like these and tell everything. Suddenly one of the students shouted that the teacher had returned and everyone jumped up from their seats joyfully. The children could not believe that the teacher had actually returned because he had been gone for a very long time and they thought that he would not come again. They immediately dropped everything they were doing and started looking at the teacher. They were very happy when they saw him. The old man came to them with gifts. In his hands were several chickens that he brought for them and the old man himself was very happy to see these children. The children immediately ran to the teacher and began to hug him. They could not contain their joy and wanted to spend as much time as possible with the teacher. Today they had a very tasty dinner because the old man brought a lot of chicken and spices. Thanks to this they made incredibly tasty chicken. Grandfather wanted to pamper the children and therefore did not spare them the ride. He understood that he was gone for a very long time and they probably missed him because of the delicious food. Grandfather said that the children can start eating and said that today they cannot resist eating as much as they want in order to satiate their hunger normally. The old man was very worried about the youngest girl, Yo, because she needed to eat as much as possible. After all, her body was just beginning to grow. The fifth student asked why they only had 2 chickens on the table because the teacher brought 3 of them, but they explained to him that the second brother would eat 1 chicken. He was upset about this and said that it was unfair because for 8 people there were only 2 chickens, and for one guy the grandfather donated a whole chicken. Chi Shim explained to Bok Gu that second brother is not feeling well and besides, he shares food with the rest of the students every time. Bok Gu was unhappy with this and said that second brother does not work in the fields and does not help with housework and he does nothing at all except read books. Chi Sim said that this is why he should eat more. After all, the second brother, although older than the elder brother, is inferior in physique. The girl heard the dialogue between her younger brothers and said that these chickens are very large and they got more food than usual, so she asked them to stop mischievousness. Song Yu took a chicken leg from his plate and passed it to his younger brother Bok Gu. Bok Gu at this moment I started to feel awkward. He said that he didn't want to eat part of his elder brother's food and he just wanted to say that it's not fair to give the second brother a whole chicken. Chi Sim didn't understand what the problem was and why the fifth student was so concerned about this issue. Bok Gu said that he couldn't eat the chicken leg that was originally on his older brother's plate and wanted to give it away. Song Yu said that there is nothing wrong with it and he doesn't want to eat chicken leg and he just needs to eat porridge. Bok Gu understood that his older brother was lying to him and now he felt very uncomfortable in front of the other students. Song Yu could not eat calmly because he was constantly watching the teacher and trying to understand what was happening to him. The teacher behaved strangely all the time, his body was trembling and it was clear from his face that he was in pain. Song Yu noticed that the teacher was not behaving as usual. This meant that most likely he was injured again when he left for a mission. He returns every time with new wounds. This frightened the boy. The night came, the moon illuminated the earth, but today it was incomplete. It was only a month. Clouds floated across the sky and covered the beautiful stars. The teacher did not sleep at night. He was in his room near the fireplace and bandaged his wounds so that his students would not see him. He understood that he was already too old and he was starting to feel this way. He noticed that he always gets wounded before leaving a mission at the very last moment. Suddenly he heard someone coming into his room and turned his head. He realized that it was one of the students who was not sleeping now and decided to come to his room. Song Yu went up to the teacher and said that the old man was hurt again, but the grandfather reassured the boy and said that there was nothing serious here. The boy explained that he was very worried about his grandfather. He started touching his grandfather's wounds and realized that he was starting to have serious problems and needed help somehow. Song Yu said that the old man should be healthy, so he asked him to be careful and accept the respect and care that Song Yu has. But the old man said that he will live to be 100 years old and will see how these guys grow old. Song Yu said that he will grow up very soon and will be able to earn money for their family. His grandfather will no longer need to leave for a long time. He asked his grandfather to wait for this moment. Boyaka smiled and hugged the boy. He said that everything would be fine and he would definitely see how these children grew up. Boyaka said that everything would be fine with him and there was no need to worry about him, but he himself understood that his body had to endure and be patient a little longer and he could not think about the fact that he was weak and old. The grandfather asked the boy what happened during his absence and how they were doing. Song Yu began to tell his grandfather the whole story of the events that happened to him. He told him about the barbarians and about the girl he saved. And after that she taught him martial arts. Boyaka was shocked by the story that the boy told him. He couldn't believe that sometimes there are such good people in the world. He thought that the boy had great luck and luck was on his side and thanked him for his good deed. Grandfather said that this girl was apparently an unusual person, but Song Yu tried to explain to him that this is not the case at all. He began to show the old man the blows that she had once shown to the boy and said that if you try very hard and learn this technique, you can cause the wind with your own hands. Boyaka thought that if this girl allowed the boy to call her aunt, then she obviously liked him, and then he thought about the fact that Kong Ho, the village in which they live, does not have a single similar girl. He wondered who she was. He thought that it would be good if this girl took the boy with her because she could teach him a lot of things because he is such a good child. There were a lot of people in the city that day. Winter came and the whole city was covered with snow. From the tea shop, which was located in the very center of the city, the screams of a woman and a man were heard about something, a very loud discussion. People passed by and did not pay attention. Boyaka came to his sister and asked for 50 coins for the next task, but she told him that she did not have that much money. The old man tried to convince her. She replied that she simply does not have that kind of money and she does not want to continue this dialogue. He said that he really needs this money and as soon as he gets a job he will immediately take it up, but for now he doesn't have a job. She asked him what he was going to spend such a large amount of money on, and the old man explained to her that his children were growing up and they needed to buy a lot of things. Boyaka said that winter has already come and he needs at least one set of warm clothes for everyone, and he has one very smart guy who needs to buy new books. She asked why he did this and why was he so worried about these children. The old man said that these are very good children and when he looks at them his heart feels caring, he becomes warmer, and for the first time in 50 years he feels something like that. She said that he was too old and he needed to quit this job and take care of himself. Boyaka persuaded Yume to give him a new job for a good reward. He said that he really needed it. He said that all his life he has been wandering around the whole area and knows a lot of different gossip and therefore the girl must keep her word. Yume understood that this old man was pushing her and said that she still has no money and her business with the tea shop is not going well. But when he looked at her with such loving and pitiful eyes, She could not help herself because this look had lured her since her youth. She could not stand it and agreed with his proposal. She said that she would give him money next time. The matter might be more complicated and perhaps it would drag on for several years. The old man replied that he would be happy to agree to this task. He took the girl by the hand and thanked her. She thought that she could send him to where he would be a target, but she didn't understand why he was still grateful to her. Boyaka said that he was grateful to her for knowing about his problems and still continuing to take care of him, and said that he was ready to work. He turned his head to the side so as not to look at his beautiful eyes anymore and thought that Boyaka was a very frivolous person, but still she could not restrain herself in front of his gaze. She no longer wanted to look at him and got out of the chair after that. She asked him to sit still and wait. He looked, but only the girl came into the room and thought that he had one less problem and 50 coins. And the children will be able to live without starving for 3 years, and he will still be able to buy a lot of books and notebooks for Ram. He waited for the girl to return with the coins and thought about how best to spend this money. Yumei left the room with a red package containing a box. She said that she put silver and iron coins to make it easier to use. Yumei asked the old man to check the contents of this box so that he could personally verify that it contained the correct amount of money. Boyaka said that there is no point in checking the contents of the box for him because he trusts it. The old man returned home with gifts for the children that he bought in the city. Enthusiastic cries of children could be heard from the house. They were glad that the teacher was so kind today. The students looked at new clothes and chose costumes for themselves depending on which one they liked best. Along with these clothes, the teacher brought a lot of delicious meat jerky to pamper the children, but they began to play and quarrel with them. The teacher took out a large orange package and said that this was a gift for Ram, and the boy at that moment was shocked because he did not expect such a gift from the teacher. Boyaka said that the boy goes to school and studies with books there, and it is inconvenient and therefore he can now study at home thanks to these books. Ram said that this is all very expensive, and where does grandfather get so much money to give him such expensive gifts? He said that the school teacher said that such smart children are rare, and this is the first time he has seen such concentration in a child of his age. Ram didn't know how to react to these words from his grandfather. He just continued to look at the gift. The grandfather took the boy by the shoulders and said that the teacher even noted that he would not have difficulty with the exam, and the grandfather hoped that the boy would become the youngest student in the school. The old man said that he has very high hopes for him, and if the boy grows up to be a big man it will be a good example for the rest of the students. Ram promised his grandfather that he would live up to his expectations and become the best student because his grandfather invests a lot of money and effort in his education. The old man hugged the boy and said that his teacher would barely be able to write his name, but in his old age he would have such a wonderful student. Ram still felt guilty that his grandfather gave him such expensive gifts. He understood that his grandfather would have to work very hard because of this. Song Yu knew that if grandpa gives them such expensive gifts, it means that he will leave soon, and apparently he will be going for a long time. Winter was already coming to an end. The snow on the trees began to melt and much less snow fell from the sky than before. Spring came and the flowers began to open in their buds and the air became completely different. Now it was warm and pleasant. Grandfather had not yet gone on a new mission, and therefore he was able to teach his students martial arts. But he understood that the time would soon come and we would hit the road again, and his happiness did not last long. Yumei then told him that she had a job, but she didn't know how long this work would take. She said that the amount for this work was very large, so she agreed, but nothing is known exactly about this work, and the old man asked how much they pay for this work. She said that for this work they pay 100 coin if he can finish this work and return alive and everything will be successful. You will pay him another 300 to me. Boyaka understood that for all his work he was paid as much as 400 coins, and this gave him the understanding that this work could be his last, then he could calmly continue to live with his children and not work. He said that it's worth risking your life for this and trying because such a chance rarely comes. Song Yu worked in the field with his brothers. The old man looked at him and thought that in 3 years this boy would have nothing to worry about because everything would be fine. He saw that the older student paid attention to him and seemed to understand what this old man was thinking about. Song Yu looked at his grandfather and the video showed that he had a very strange behavior. He did not understand why, but he was glad that his grandfather was happy. Boyaka showed the boy a thumbs up and said that he was very glad that he had such a wonderful senior student. At that moment the boy felt awkward because it was very unexpected. Night fell on this day. There was a full moon and there were few clouds in the sky, but the stars were shining very brightly. The eldest student, as always, accompanied his grandfather on his way, and the grandfather gave the boy a red package and told him to take it. Song Yu took the package and asked what was there. Boyaka explained that this time he will have to leave for a very long time and he does not know exactly when he will return. For this reason, he decided to give some money to the doctor so that the children will always have medicine for Co Yo, and he leaves you some money for them so that they can buy food. Song Yu asked his grandfather how far will he go and where is he going. The old man explained that he still doesn't know, but he asked the boy not to worry about anything, and even if there is nothing outstanding about him, his body is well preserved. He leaned over to the boy and asked him what he should do during his absence. Song Yu replied that he should be a support for all younger brothers and sisters because he is an older brother. The old man said that this is exactly how the boy is an older brother, but the rest of the students should take care of him. At that moment a comet flew across the sky. It was the perfect moment to make a wish. The comet flew by very quickly and disappeared into the cosmic sky. The old man said goodbye to the boy and said that he had to leave and promised him that he would definitely return. Song Yu carefully watched his grandfather disappear over the horizon, and all this time he stood and watched him. He made only one wish when he saw the comet, so that grandfather would return safe and sound this time. Morning came and the sun began to emerge from the horizon. It appeared between two high rocks. The children, as always, slept together on a large mattress that lay on the wooden floor. Suddenly, the older brother came into the room and woke them up. After that, they all slowly began to wake up. Yo, the youngest student of all, saw that her grandfather was not there and asked her older brother where he was. She was still completely asleep. Probably, nevertheless, she wanted to find out where her grandfather had disappeared. Song Yu hugged his little sister and said that grandpa had already left for work and he left at night because he urgently needed to go to work. The children began to talk about the fact that grandfather had left. They were wondering when he would return and what gift he would bring him next time. One of the brothers scolded the fifth student for thinking only about gifts and said that the teacher is already old and gifts are the last thing you need to think about at their age. Song Yu said that grandpa will return as usual this time. When they grow up they will be able to take care of grandpa themselves and then the teacher will no longer need to work. Song Yu ordered the children to quickly wake up and clean the room. After that, they should go outside and start their activities. Ram called the senior student to him and said that he needed to talk to him. Ram asked the older student why his grandfather left. He suggested that the situation in their family was very bad. And so the grandfather was forced to leave, but the older student replied that there was no reason to worry and the teacher just wanted to work a little before getting too old. Ram thought that the whole problem was in him because he only eats and wears out clothes and his grandfather constantly buys him something, but the senior student explained to him that if the second student succeeds, the rest can too. As Myun Moon says, they are all one whole. Song Yu explained to this guy that his grandfather did not go to work because of him, but for his sake, and he went there for the sake of all of them and a little later they will not take care of the teacher. Ram replied that he knows all this, but grandfather still returns every time with new wounds on his body and it scares him. Song Yu asked the second student to speak more quietly so that the other children would not know about it because it would be bad if they knew about it. Ram said that this is all true and there is nothing to hide from others. Song Yu once again repeated to him that this is all being done for the sake of all of them and the teacher was very worried that everything would work out for them if he suddenly gets sick, then they will all starve. Therefore, while he can move, he is trying to earn money, that's what the teacher said. Ram felt guilty and could not calm down. He said that he would also go to work with everyone else in the field. Song Yu yelled at the second student and said that he was talking complete nonsense and he should mind his own business and not worry about it. He put his hand on our shoulder and said that the teacher has great hopes for this guy and we can't let him down. He asked the second student to stop doubting because neither their teacher or the rest of the students want the second student to give up, none of them are as smart as him. Song Yu said that if a real man has aspirations, he should follow them and not be distracted by everything else. That's what the teacher said, and the boy should choose his path and follow it, and the current situation in the family is not the problem of the second student. But Ram continued to doubt his abilities and he could not calm down. Because of this he felt guilty and felt that he did not deserve such gifts from the teacher. The third student came into the room and said that the elder brother is right, if none of them can succeed, then they will all have to constantly worry. Only go if someone can do it, definitely the second student. She asked the second student not to doubt the words of his elder brother, and if he cannot be purposeful then he is not a man, and if he wants to give up then let him do it now. Ram said that everything is not like that at all and he is not a weakling and is not ready to give up and he wants to go to the end. She said that she now recognizes the second student and this is more like his normal behavior. She said that everyone believes in him and all the students are waiting for him to succeed. The rest of the children were on the street and through a small window in the wall they eavesdropped on the dialogue in the room. They shouted that when they grew up they would buy all the books in the stores for the second student and paper and brushes with ink. They were ready to do everything for him. Song Yu let the second disciple listen to the support from his younger brothers and said that these guys believe in him. Ram promised his brothers that he would definitely cope with this task and reach the end. A lot of time has already passed and winter has come again. Snow was falling from the sky in large flakes. Moonlight rays of light fell through a large window in the wall. Ram loved the full moon because on these days there was a lot of light from the moon and he could study at night. He felt happy every time he was left alone with books, and this was the moment he loved most about learning because no one rushed him or forced him to do it. He turned over sheets of paper to read new symbols. He wanted to go to a new page, but suddenly he heard a noise in the room and saw a light. Ram saw a hand that put a small candle for him at 100 so that he could have lighting in his room. The senior student put this candle so that the second student would not spoil his eyesight when he studied at night. Ram said that it was not worth doing this because the oil is very expensive and the family already spends a lot of money on it. Song Yu said that he could not buy the second disciple a new book, but he could afford to buy oil, so he asked the second disciple not to suffer about this. Ram looked at the older student in surprise and then said that he was not suffering and this was not at all like him. Suddenly Ram told a story that in ancient times there lived a man named Song Kong and people say that he counted books in the moonlight. Song Yu continued this story and said that in the summer this man read books and used the glow of fireflies in the night for this. Ram was very happy that her older brother also knew this story. Song Yu said that she heard this story from one of the narrator's uncles, who came to work at the tea house. Ram asked his elder brother if there were such people there. Song Yu said that he sat for a long time and listened to his stories. It was very interesting, that's why many people come there every day despite the expensive tea. Ram began to smile and laugh. He said that he would really like to visit there because it is very interesting. Song Yu said that he remembered this only when the second student began to tell this story. But now it's too late. Therefore, he asked the boy not to sit at books for so long. Song Yu said that he still needs to go to school tomorrow. The senior student got up early and noticed that his temperature was rising and his body had been working since the morning. He took a wooden stick that was near the front door. He went outside despite the fact that it was still very early and cold. The guy still decided that this was the best time to train. With a sharp movement he stood in a fighting stance and raised the stick up. Song Yu noticed that lately he has become too hot. It doesn't look like he is sick, his body is overflowing with vital energy. He was practicing martial arts techniques early in the morning and trying to learn a new technique. He said that he would never give up and would practice until you get the best result. Every morning he practiced with his stick. His movements became clear and precise. His body became stronger every day and his muscles improved. Song Yu felt that his body was becoming stronger and his internal energy was improving every day, his movements were becoming strong and clear. Summer has come, he was training as always in the morning and suddenly heard one of the students calling him. He turned his head towards the student who was approaching him and decided to find out what was happening. The younger student ran to the older student and asked him to teach him these martial techniques. But it was very bad because he was still very young. Song Yu understood that he was still too small and it was too early for him to learn these martial techniques. The younger student said that he had learned absolutely everything that his older brothers taught him and he wants to start new learning. Song Yu tried to explain to the younger student that he had to remember these techniques so well that he could repeat them with his eyes closed. The boy said that he can already do these techniques with his eyes closed and said that he can even show it now in front of everyone. Song Yu asked the younger student to demonstrate his knowledge in practice and convince everyone that he had already grown up and was ready to start new martial techniques. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes and tried to tune in before performing this technique. The boy stood in a fighting stance and prepared to perform the exercise. The senior student watched him carefully. He started showing exercises and tried to prove to them that he had managed to learn all the moves that the older brothers did. His movements were very fast, but they were still uncertain. He tried to show maximum seriousness and do everything right so that the elder brothers would believe in him. He tried to perform the movement clearly and now he needed to deliver the final blow to do this. He raised the stick up. The boy performed a combination of movements with a final blow which he delivered through the air. The children could not believe their eyes. They carefully watched their younger brother and saw that he was very skilled with a stick and was able to learn all these movements alone. Song Yu was delighted that the junior disciple was able to learn this martial combination of movements on his own and said that the junior disciple was a genius. The older student laughed and said that after what they had just seen, the older students need to try twice as hard otherwise the younger student will catch up with them. Chi Sim scratched his face with his hand and said that he is trying very hard, but if he lifts his feet off the ground, he loses his balance. The younger student was very happy that the older brothers praised him and asked the older student how well did he do. Song Yu approached the boy and said that he was doing very well and that he was moving better than the rest of the students now. He was very glad that he did so well and the boy was able to prove to the rest of the senior students that he was worthy of learning new martial art techniques. The fifth student Bok Gu invited the younger student to fight him and measure his strength, and we thought it would be good practice. Chi Sim asked the senior student his thoughts on who would win this fight. And the senior student replied that Bok Gu would win. The guy said that this was a very unexpected answer because the last time Bok Gu lost to him in training sparring. Song Yu answered his questions and said that Bok Gu lost only to him and other disciples cannot defeat him. Bok Gu said that he was giving the younger student a head start and suggested that he attack first. The younger student took the stick in his hands and decided to strike the first blow. He thought that he should take advantage of this opportunity. He threw his first blow from above, but his opponent was able to parry this blow. Bok Gu immediately jumped to the side and changed his trajectory. He decided to strike the younger student from below. He thought that this would be a good opportunity to break through his defense. The younger student was able to repel this attack and blocked it, but he understood that it was difficult to block. The boy took a jump and bounced back. Bok Gu didn't expect the younger student to be so fast and therefore missed with his attack and hit the ground with his stick. The younger student knew that this was a good opportunity to outline the attack and began to make circular movements with his stick. He decided to strike his opponent from the right side. Bok Gu had a hard time fighting it off and he didn't expect the younger student to be so fast. He began to receive several at once and this forced him to constantly be in a defensive stance. He constantly had to give back control in battle. The younger disciple sped up and began to launch many fast attacks. He tried to break through the fifth disciple's defense. Chi Sim is very surprised because the youngest student is pushing the fifth student out of the battlefield, and Song Yu replied that from the outside everything looks exactly like this, but if you look at his face you can see something more important. The younger student learns quickly, but he lacks strength and endurance because when training new ones he quickly gets tired, but Bok Gu keeps up with the older student. He started making circles with his stick. His face was happy and calm. He realized that now was the perfect moment to start attacking the child. He suddenly repulsed the boy's attack, and the younger student did not expect that this could happen. He thought that victory was already in his hands. The youngest student was very tired after the series of attacks he made and now understands that he invested his strength in these attacks, but the fifth student still continues to counterattack. Bok Gu struck with his stick and it was pointed towards the younger student. He tried to deliver his blow in such a way as to break through his opponent's defense. At that moment the stick was moving so fast that it seemed like it was rubber. He was able to break through the defense of the younger student and hit him on the hand with his stick. The younger student felt severe pain in his hand and threw away the stick. He just received damage. Bok Gu put his wooden fighting stick on the ground and informed the younger student that he had just lost. But the youngest student suddenly began accusing the fifth student of being a coward, and this seemed a very strange accusation for Bok Gu. The younger student said that he had never learned anything like this, so he could not block the blows of the fifth student. Bok Gu stood happy in front of his concept and said that hitting a weak spot is the best way to win. If the younger student could not repel this attack, it was his fault. The younger student doesn't understand what the problem is and why this student says that. Bok Gu explained that the older brother and the teacher teach them the same things and he can spin the stick at the same speed as Bok Gu. In this case, to win you need to use your head and slightly change your basic movements. The younger student was upset and said that he had simply never studied this focusing technique and therefore did not know how to do it. The fifth student smiled and said that he had never learned this martial arts technique either. The younger student was very upset because of this and almost started crying because I don't understand how the older brother learned this technique. But when he gave himself time to think a little about it, it finally dawned on him and he understood what the words of the fifth student meant. Bok Gu smiled when he realized that the younger student had finally figured out how it all worked. He was pleased that this child was smart. But the whole problem was that when the younger student realized how this military technique works, he wanted revenge and therefore challenged the fifth student again to a duel. Bok Gu refused another battle and began to leave the battlefield. He said that he needed to enjoy his well-deserved victory. The brothers started laughing at this whole situation and they were happy when they saw that the younger student wanted to fight so much and was learning new things. Chi Sim said that the senior student was right and everything happened as he said, but Song Yu told him that each student has his own style and his own strengths, so you can't compare them. Chi Sim smiled and realized that his older brother's words made sense. He was very glad that he also had strengths and weaknesses. One of the students cooked food at night for all the other students. She was very worried that today she had to use little rice to cook her food. She came up with the brilliant idea of adding a little more rice to the cauldron so that tomorrow they wouldn't be able to eat more food. She saw a large tub containing rice. They usually always hid it there. But when she opened the lid she saw that there was very little rice left, and this is very bad news for the whole family. The girl understood that she needed to talk about this situation with the older student and tell him everything, because she needed to come up with a solution to this problem. She explained to him that they only have enough rice for 3 months. This is a very short period of time, and when winter ends, they will run out of rice. Song Yu immediately remembered that the blacksmith told him that he had urgent matters. So he will return next fall. An auntie is from the tea house and helps them so much. It's already embarrassing to ask her for help. The girl asked the older student if he knew when the teacher would return. She said that the year before last he conveyed the news through one of the caravan guards that he would arrive in a year. Song Yu asked her not to worry about it, but she still wanted to know what he was going to do and how he was going to solve this problem. Song Yu said that there are not many options for solving the problem and you just need to find a way to make money. She wanted to know how he was going to do it. The guy asked her not to worry and trust him and told her to come home because it was cold outside. Song Yu looked at her leaving and thought that he didn't understand at all how he could earn money. He hoped that they would have enough money to live this year and remembered that medicine for So Yul is very expensive. He hung his head down and said that he needed to think about it. If they didn't eat well he would feel guilty about it. All that worried this boy that day was just where he could find a job and how to earn money for his family. He looked at the nerves and understood that even adults are very difficult to do this now, and it's enough just to look at the guests of the tea house and understand that people have very little money. He was angry with himself for not being able to figure out where to make money and tried to direct all his thoughts to finding a job. The morning came and the sun was shining very brightly. The city was very quiet and calm. It was a normal weekday day and there were few people at the market. Song Yu decided to go to the city and approach all the people in order to go to their work, but he was denied this desire to earn money. He went to different establishments and talked to people in order to get hired. But every time he heard the same answer that they didn't need workers now, so they asked the boy to leave. There was no work for him here. Night fell and the boy spent the whole day looking for work, but everything was unsuccessful. He was walking along a forest path on his way back home and thought that life was very unfair and suggested that he needed to go to a larger village in order to find a job, but he could not go there all the time. His sister was waiting for him near the entrance to the house. She was very glad that the senior student had returned. Song Yu asked his sister why she was still not in bed and why was she standing here on the street. She answered him that she would soon go to the house. She asked him if he managed to find her any job. He replied that today all his attempts to find a job were unsuccessful and tomorrow he will go again. The sister suggested that the older brother talk to the rest of the students instead of training. They could catch a rabbit or a bird or collect medicinal herbs to sell. Song Yu said that this was a bad idea because then all the discipline they had been building for years would be destroyed. He asked his sister not to worry about work and promised that tomorrow he would be able to find this job and would not have to worry about it. He said that he would go to a larger village and there would definitely be some vacancy for him there. The sister was very worried about the older student. She asked him if he had eaten anything today. Song Yu replied that he was not hungry, but nevertheless, at that moment his stomach began to grumble very loudly and made it clear that he really wanted to eat. She said that she would immediately go to the house and put a few potatoes for the senior student and asked him to eat and then go to bed. Song Yu was sitting in a large room and I was eating food that my sister put for him near the window. Ram heard that someone was very loud and slurping in the next room and decided to see who it was. When he entered he saw an older student there. Song Yu was frightened by the unexpected appearance of the second student and almost dropped the potato out of fear. Ram decided to share the news with the senior student and said that there would soon be a drought in the southern regions and therefore everyone was very worried. He said that he heard this from his odnoklassniki. Some of them have relatives who trade there. And after that he said that he still wants to share something with his older brother. Ram said that in 2 years he will finally be able to show his abilities. The second student informed the older student that from now on he wants to focus only on this exam to show what he is capable of. Song Yu was very glad that the second student made such a serious decision. He was ready to take the exam. Ram said that they are worried about this and don't know how to behave correctly because he is very afraid that he will not succeed. But he remembered that when you made a promise to all the brothers and said that he would only think about exams and pass them in 2 years. Song Yu replied that he will succeed and will definitely cope with these exams. Ram became a warbler and bowed to the senior student. It was very important for him that the senior student always believed in him. Song Yu understood that if the second student was going to prepare for this exam, then he would need a lot of money to buy him books and at least to go to this exam hall. He looked at the bitten potato and thought that there must be some way to earn money and help out all the members of his family. Suddenly he remembered one very important moment from his life and thought that this was exactly what could help him. He remembered that the aunt who he once saved showed her kindness and generosity. In addition to teaching him about martial arts, she gave him something else. That day she reached into the inside pocket of her jacket and took out something very valuable. She gave him a precious ring and said that if his situation in life became completely disastrous, he could go to the largest store in the village and sell it. He took out this ring and thought that it was wrong to sell what the benefactor gave him, but this aunt then told him to do so in case of urgent need, and he began to think, where is the largest store nearby to sell this ring. The next day came and the boy immediately went to the nearest village to sell this ring. In the pawn shop that day it was very quiet and calm. There were no people and no visitors, only one salesman who was sitting at a large table and wiping a vase in the dust. This seller sat and thought why he didn't have any visitors for several months. No simpletons came here, and it began to confuse him. Suddenly the doors to the store opened and a new visitor came in. The salesman immediately jumped up from his seat and joyfully greeted the new visitor. He looked closely at this visitor and thought that something strange was happening here. Song Yu said that he needed to sell something at this pawn shop, and the seller said that this is not a place for children. The boy asked the seller to carefully look at the ring he had brought to sell, and his eyes lit up. But then he started coughing and said that this ring doesn't look special and looks like an ordinary trinket. But the seller was deceiving the boy, and when he took this ring into his hands, he realized that this was an unusual ring and that he was doing it by a real master using a special technique when creating. Song Yu asked the seller how much he was willing to give for this jewelry. The seller said that this ring looked like a rare thing and a real master worked on it, and said that he could give only 1 gold coin. The boy did not agree because it was very little. And he said that he knew that this stone was quite expensive. The merchant began to explain to the boy that now there are big problems with money and he cannot give him more for this ring. The stone inside this ring is not real, so the boy agreed with this proposal. The merchant was very glad that he managed to fool the boy and immediately began to rummage around in his desk. He put the documents on the table in front of the boy and said that he could familiarize himself with the terms of the purchase and sale agreement. The boy put his finger stamp on these documents. The merchant asked the guy to wait a little near the desktop. He put on 1 silver coin, and Song Yu was very indignant because it was a silver coin and they agreed on 1 gold coin. The merchant began to smile, and at that moment he looked like the devil. He said that he would never in his life give this child a gold coin. Song Yu said that even though he lives in a village it does not mean that he is stupid, and explained to the merchant that he should give him a gold coin. The merchant said that this boy is crazy and he is talking some kind of nonsense. Song Yu asked to return the ring to him. He said that he would not sell it to the merchant. He showed him a document that the boy had already signed, and therefore the documents could no longer return the ring. Song Yu said that this document is about 1 coin that the merchant must give to buy the ring, but the merchant said that it is not about a gold coin. Song Yu said that this merchant is a swindler and a charlatan, and asked him to return this money or the ring in an amicable way before he used force. The man asked this guy not to yell in his store and said that the boy could not own such a ring, and apparently he stole it, and 1 silver coin should be enough for him to live for a couple of months. Song Yu said that he did not agree with such conditions and asked them to return the ring to him. The seller turned his head back and called his friend. He said that a visitor had appeared in the store and was rowdy. 2 tall and strong men came out of the mystery of the room that was behind the red cloth. Song Yu was very angry when he saw these men. He was ready to destroy everything they saw because he had just been deceived so much and decided to make his last hopes of making money. The men who came out of the room were very dangerous and they worked here as bouncers. The merchant ordered his bouncers to throw this puppy out of his store and asked them not to forget and beat him to a pulp. They smiled and started laughing because they understood that this was a very weak opponent and they could quickly deal with him. One of the bouncers walked up to the boy and grabbed him by the face and asked where this brat got so much courage to be rude to the merchant. Song Yu removed the thug's hand from his shoulder and asked not to be touched again. The bully said that it is worth beating this puppy several times so that he begins to be afraid of his elders. He swung his fist and wanted to hit him. His big and strong fist was already flying towards where Song Yu stood. The boy realized that the situation was getting out of control and now he urgently needed to take some action to stay alive. Song Yu realized that this was the perfect moment to try his fighting techniques in action and dodged the blow and tripped this thug. The bouncer understood that this guy was smarter than he might seem at first glance and felt that he was about to fall. Song Yu was able to knock down this big guy's daughter-in-law using his agility and ingenuity. The merchant was very surprised and shocked that this guy had the courage to defend himself against such strong opponents. The second bouncer was also surprised that this boy was defending himself and was able to knock down the son of such a thug. He was angry at this child and clenched his fist in order to strike back at him. But Song Yu moved faster than this idiot and therefore managed to strike him in the jaw with his fist. He put all his strength and power into his attack because he was very angry with these people and the big man also fell to the ground. Song Yu was very surprised that his blows caused such a large amount of damage. He had never used his strength in action and could not believe that he was so strong. He wondered if he should continue this fight or just let these thugs go. At that moment, a big bald man began to get up from the ground. He was very angry that he had just been dropped to the ground. He wanted to take revenge on this child and try to hit him again in order to break something for him. The bouncer took advantage of the fact that the boy now did not understand what to do and decided to immediately strike him. Song Yu felt very strong pain when he was hit and blood began to splash out of his mouth. Song Yu got angry at this big man and lost control of himself and started beating this big guy. He grabbed him by the shoulders and tried to throw another blow. He kneed him in the stomach and the big man started screaming in pain. After the bouncer took a knee to the stomach, he also started coughing up blood. Song Yu was scared when he saw that this was a big strong man on the blood chelkashlet. He thought that if this big guy died then he would have big problems. The merchant felt in danger. He was very scared because he had never seen such a small boy be able to fight so well. Now they were left alone and the merchant understood that he could no longer protect himself. After all, this guy knocked out 2 of his guards. Song Yu understood that if he couldn't get money now, then the day after tomorrow his students would starve and that didn't suit him. The merchant knelt down and began to ask for forgiveness from the boy. He asked him for mercy and did not want to be killed. Song Yu extended his hand to him and asked him to return here what was rightfully his. The merchant said that he would give everything he had if only this guy would save his life and not kill him. Song Yu said that he was attacking them with his fists and that the merchant had set the guards on the boy, so he would take his item and 1 silver coin and leave from here. The merchant said that he would do everything as the boy asked. I gave him the ring along with the silver coin. Evening had already come and the boy was returning back to his home. He ran as quickly as possible in order to return as quickly as possible. When he ran, he only thought about the situation that happened to him today in the trading store. He understood that these people whom he beat did not die and therefore he did nothing wrong. And in addition, they themselves attacked him. Suddenly he heard something very strange and decided to turn his head back. Song Yu noticed that in this forest now, besides me, there are other people who also move quickly in space. These were unusual people, they were ninjas with white masks on their heads and they were chasing a boy. Suddenly these ninjas stopped in front of him and blocked his way. The ninjas looked at this boy and said that his body is an adult, but he is still a child, so they must deal with him as quickly as possible. The main ninja approached the boy and asked how he could already be a thief at such a young age. Song Yu at that moment lowered his head down and realized that problems today would accompany him all day. He began to scream very loudly, red energy began to be released from his body, which meant that he was now in a state of rage. He began to collect the fire sphere in his hands and said that he was not a thief and had not done anything wrong. After that, he calmed down and said that he was not a thief, these things were originally his, but Ninja said that the boy himself was to blame for selling it and not finding out the true value. Song Yu said that it was the seller who wanted to buy the ring for 1 gold coin but gave him a silver one, so he did it and it will be invalid. The ninja asked this guy again. Did the owner actually originally say that he would give 1 gold coin? Song Yu said that everything was exactly like that and the merchant promised 1 coin and it was about a gold coin. The rest of the ninja said that there was no time to communicate with this boy and they needed to solve this matter as quickly as possible. The ninja put his hand on his shoulder and told the boy to quickly give him the money or they would cut off his arm or legs, but he didn't want to do that. Song Yu refused to give this money and the ninja ring and therefore they were very angry with him. He threw this ninja's hand off his shoulder and realized that he needed to start a battle because they just wouldn't get away from him. After that, he threw this ninja's hand off his shoulder, he immediately received a blow to the liver. Song Yu understood that he had to attack even if he didn't want to do it, but there was simply no other choice. He began to strike this ninja and tried to break through his defense. The ninja was surprised that this boy was moving so fast. Song Yu tried to strike directly, but suddenly yellow energy began to wrap around his arm. The ninja blocked the boy's hand and did not allow him to move. Song Yu felt very strong pain because this ninja tried to break his arm. He used the fighting technique that his aunt taught him and thought that this was the time when he should use it for the first time. The boy struck the ninja in the face with his palm. Song Yu tried to perform the technique according to all the rules and laws so that it would be as effective as possible. At that moment, he remembered what his aunt told him: if he uses his hand, then he needs to understand that he must kill his opponent or make sure that the opponent cannot resist. Song Yu then thought that he would not use this technique because he would have to kill his opponent. The ninja was shocked that this guy could use such strong fighting techniques. In addition, he knew nothing about this martial art. He struck him in the face with his fist and took revenge on the boy. He kicked him and knocked him down until the guy lost consciousness. Song Yu started coughing up blood and couldn't resist anymore. He could no longer fight and fell to the ground. The ninja said that they need to take this child's things and leave here. It was already night and the moon was shining in the center of the sky. Song Yu was only able to come to his senses now and tried to walk home. He felt that his whole body hurt after this fight and he was only getting worse. Suddenly he started coughing up blood and felt even worse. He could no longer stand on his feet and began to fall. Song Yu fell to the ground and lost consciousness. He was very tired that day and could no longer walk.